What's been the best part about creating the RAS score?
It's been a blast because I didn't expect when I started doing this that it would ever pick up and that I would
Mm,
get to do interviews on actual team sites and things like that. Never would have thought any of that kind of stuff would happen. And it's just so much fun to do that stuff. I mean, you cover your favorite team. You know how fun it can be
yeah,
just to talk about sports and to really get into it. But having people that reach out to me, players that reach out to me and want to know what their score is, that's always been so much fun to me. And one of my favorite interactions happened this year. We had an offensive lineman who ran, I mean, he's one of the top testing tackles of the class. And he was mad because I didn't score him even higher because he got a time that was a little bit faster. He wanted to put that in. I was like, look, I got a process I follow. I take the unofficial numbers until I get the official ones, and then I use those ones. And he was mad that he wasn't slightly higher. And it was seriously a difference of 0.01. But he was fighting for it, man. He was arguing for it, arguing why I should change it, why I should
mm,
make the change. And that kind of stuff really gets to me because you see that competitive nature that a lot of these guys have. They really want to do well, even when it's something that ultimately doesn't mean all that much. It's the difference is so small. It's not
mhm.
that big of a deal. But he was like, no, I want it. I ran it. I got it. This is the time that I got. You should change it. But that's been a lot of fun to me is seeing just how competitive those guys are. You talk about competitiveness, but there's being able to see that in my sphere, the stuff that I work in is a lot of fun.
Have you been able to see a correlation between your scores and NFL success? I'm just kind of curious.
For most positions, yeah,
Mm,
it's not necessarily clear whether it's a causality thing, right? It's
right.
not a the higher score you get, the better you're going to do. It's not like that. It's thresholds, which is why I set up the whole color coding thing and why the color coding is set up the way that it is. Anything below 5, I have it in the red. Anything above 8, I have in green. Anything in between is in yellow. And the reason that I did that is when I did my comparisons for Pro Bowls, 1,000-yard receiving seasons, 1,000-yard rushing seasons, and double-digit sack seasons.
Yeah.
They all had almost exactly the same percentile of hits for guys that were over 8 and then guys that were below 5. And
Huh.
then, of course, obviously everything in between. The percentages were almost the same across the board, regardless of which position I was looking at for those things. So that was really interesting to me. So now I'm trying to find other ways to gauge success. And that's where the tough part comes in, is finding ways to say, what is a successful player, right? You don't
Yeah.
think it would be that hard, but when you're trying to put data on it, it's really tough because there's no stat for an offensive line. You can get group stats for how the whole team does, but that's not an individual stat for an offensive line. So I'm trying to break it down. I'm starting to pull data for starts, for career AV, yearly AV, which is a stat
Mhm.
measured on Pro Football Reference, for those of you who aren't familiar. I'm trying to put together as much data as I can so that I can expand that even further. And then, of course, show that to people by allowing them to pull up these tables and say, hey, go look at this stuff, make your own
Yeah.
decisions. And then the fun one that I'm trying to get is I'm trying to break down the rosters by year. So you could go look at the Kansas City Chiefs for 2017 and be like, what was their average score this year?
Yeah.
What was their receiving core look like this year? I'm trying to put that together. It's just a massive amount of data,
Mhm.
trying to put all this stuff together. So it's a little ways out yet, but there is a correlation for most positions. The biggest one easily is tight end.
Interesting.
Defensive end is another one, offensive tackle, and then cornerback, linebacker, receiver, and running back all have good correlation. But there's so much typing at those positions, different types of players,
Mhm.
that it gets a little muddy once you start actually looking into it, because there's a big difference between your Julio Joneses and your Calvin Johnsons and guys like Antonio Brown or Steve Smith.
Right.
There's a big difference in those types of players. So the athletic requirements are a little bit different. So there is a correlation. Not sure how clear it is because of the typing stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting because when I look at this, some people say, "Well, there's not a direct, correlation to how they're going to do," and you got to take it with context, take it with a grain of salt. It's just really to compare these numbers with other guys. That's what I like to use the tool for, to see how they stack up against other prospects in there. And how long did it take you to build up this database? Do you do it all yourself?
Oh yeah, I am a team of one. I always
Oh
joke
my.
that I have a secretary. It's my wife. She does some of the work for me when I'm trying to pull this stuff together. But yeah, it's mostly just me. And I say that meaning I'm the one that puts the stat together. I'm the one that
Mhm.
collects the data. But there's so many people involved in NFL scouting in general that really go underappreciated. You
Yeah.
know, scouts are the ones out there that are getting these numbers. They report those numbers to what's called the APT, which are the guys that actually send those numbers out to the NFL. Websites like Draft Scout, they compile those numbers over time. You know, there's guys like Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl who follows all these players and tracks them and makes sure that anytime he finds a number, he makes sure that's out there because there's fan interest and people are trying to make sure that that stuff's out there. I'm trying to do a better job of sourcing where I get that information from because this has only been online for a year and change. You know, I don't have that built out as well as I'd like to. I'm trying to get that better out there. But there's a lot of people involved with making this kind of thing happen, even if the actual stat itself is just me.